That's good. And I get the fun day because we're talking about formulation. So, you know, the people who missed day one, such a shame you missed day one, but it's okay because we've got it recorded. So hopefully once the recording gets edited, you'll have access to day one with Matt. And he was fabulous. So today what I'm going to focus on is bringing together the day one and start getting you to think about how all that information you were thrown at yesterday, how does it all work, this case formulation. So the American says conceptualization, we say formulation, but it means the same thing. Okay. So now, I mean, how many people are getting the grasp of CRB 1s and 2s, especially who hasn't been exposed to FAP? I don't know if for you, Natalie, and Caroline, did I give your name right?
Yeah. Yeah, very long case. Yeah.
It's okay. So CRB1, problem behavior, CRB2, improvement behavior that we want to nudge them to do in therapy. So it's easy to say that, but then how to identify which one is which, right? Is it based on our own judgment? Is it based on what the client thinks they need to change? I don't know. What are do you have any sense of what the criteria are? How do we decide what's CRB1 versus CRB2?
Is it helpful?
Is it helpful
to them, getting closer to what they want, their values? So is that behavior helping them closer to what they want? Is it keeping them away from it?
Okay.
It does depend, I guess, the situation.
Yeah. Okay, so closer to what they want.
Stuff happening in the present within the therapy session, so it can't be historically things like that. It's got to be activated.
Yeah, I'm really glad that's hit home now. It's got to happen in the session. It's called clinically relevant behavior because the behavior is happening in front of us as observable, or we want it in the room. So we can observe and we can see the behavior happening. So whatever is happening in front of us, it's got to represent either a problem behavior or a workable behavior. Okay? So now, in determining whether there's some other categories. This is the hardest thing for behavioral theory, because it's so contextually based. It depends on the situation. And often therapists find it very hard to decide what is workable, what is helpful, what's an improvement. And classic, really hardcore behaviorists do not like any kind of guideline, because as soon as we put a guideline to it or a model to it, it takes away the functional analysis of it, the pure functional analysis, if that makes sense, right? So, but the problem is we have to train therapists, and if you go through a pure behavioral training, it takes years and years. And how can you disseminate training in a feasible, doable way? So some strategies have to be created to help us to have some sort of skeleton, some sort of shortcut to work out what is the problem behavior and what is the target behavior. So this takes us to rule 4. So far, we've covered the first 3 rules. Remember what they are from day 1. And even if you're not here day 1, people in this room should know what the first 3 rules are.
Awareness.
Awareness, yeah.
Courage, so to evoke.
To evoke, yeah. Love to reinforce. Okay. So we really practiced that yesterday. Just kind of evoking and reinforcing, especially the reinforcing part, giving feedback. So a lot of that happening today. Now, rule 4 is therapist noticing impact in the room. And this is where we start to really fill out the formulation. So we want to see how are they responding to us, what can we evoke in the room, and that kind of interaction allows us to start filling in the pieces and create a behavioral model of the person in front of us. So FAP is very much about functional analysis and creating a behavioral model, rather than a purely skill-based approach, if that makes sense. It's a process. It's a model-making process. So often people come into FAP and they don't quite grasp it, but you come to ACT and say, oh, yeah, ACT makes sense because those are the things I can do, and it makes it easier to learn, of course. But ACT is similar to CBT because it gives you lots of different tools and ways of formulating that's a little bit, a little more guided, I suppose. But FAP is pure in its functional analysis, and I really like that because it allows us to create a very individual model. So, rule 4, what does it look like? It looks like us being really brave and courageous and sharing our experience of the client with them. So, if somebody's sitting in a room and you notice that they look really uncomfortable, I would share that. Like, notice that you come in feeling really agitated and uncomfortable. Is there anything, would you like to take a moment just to orient yourself to the room, just to relax into the room? You make yourself a bit more comfortable. So, by saying that, what is that? What did I just do? When I ask my clients to be more comfortable, what is actually that move? It's being loving, and what am I trying to do? I'm trying to evoke a behavior. It's an evoke, right? So FAP is always moving through these kind of principles, rules. So every interaction, everything I do is always an evoke. And sometimes the evoke and reinforcement are the same thing. And if you can do it together, it's perfect. It's nice. It's a more gentle, compassionate evoke. So I'm inviting them to be comfortable. And now I want to watch. Are they taking that cue? Will they allow themselves to be comfortable in the room with me? And see how they shift.
Just out of interest, what happens if you get resistance? If the client's like, no, I'm absolutely fine, I'm completely relaxed.
What do you do with that information? That's your formulation.
Yeah.
So every single behavior that happens in front of you gets put into this nice box to help you create the model. So rule 4 is us watching our behavior. So when we do something, when we do evoke, what's coming back at us? Are they able to do that? Are they resisting? Or maybe they're very compliant. That's also information. Yeah. So rule 4 is the part where we start to formulate. And so in order to observe our impact, this is why our training is so intensive. Because from what Matt, all these exercises he did yesterday, in order to evoke and to create a good model, we need to know what we're bringing to the room. So we can separate our stuff from the client's stuff and our judgment from what's going on for them, right? So when Matt said, well, we kind of have to use our feeling about something, but to use our feeling, we have to be a fairly clean compass or fairly clean barometer. Okay. Any questions so far? So, evoke and then watch. And a lot of therapists find that level of transparency very uncomfortable. I don't know if anybody has experience I want to share. What is really uncomfortable for you to highlight to a client?
That they're not really engaging.
Yeah, or resistance.
Or if I feel like they've kind of pulled away from me.
Yeah.
I have a very hard time addressing that. So,
Okay.
I take it personally, trying to get better at not.
And the thing that it could be interpreted as being close to judgment.
Yeah.
I know. Who can ask? So how do you feel about me right now? How often do people ask that?
I can ask that. That was
A
fine.
couple of times.
Yeah.
But I've really had to set myself up for it and just tell myself, you're going into this session, you need to ask the question.
Yeah. And are you willing to listen to the answer? Mm-hmm. They might say, oh, it's fine. Mm-hmm. But then you can see something's not fine, because that's why you're asking the question.
Yeah.
Right? So again, that goes into your formulation box. Something's going on. You need to work out, is it me or is it them relating to me? That's a difference. Or asking a question like, Is there anything I'm doing that's not helpful? How many people have the courage to ask that as well? It's different degree of risks. Okay, so any other risky questions that you feel like cringy to ask?
I think any questions where I'm also trying to point out that maybe their reaction wasn't the most helpful.
Right.
So questions that are building to me giving them feedback,
Yeah.
those I find I have a hard time getting to. I'm trying to be more direct with them,
Yeah.
but those are also very difficult for me.
Yeah. So anything that potentially can cause highlighting differences, I think that's also a part. Okay. So now to help you start to formulate and work out what is a helpful behavior and what is unhelpful, I suppose, Glenn Callahan came up with a FAP. You won't be all familiar with that, but basically it's a questionnaire that focuses on interactions, relations. So because FAP is such a relational approach, and we are looking at in-session behavior, we are using interpersonal targets as a guideline for what is the proper behavior and what is the helpful behavior. Okay, so he came up with basically 5 functional categories. And these categories are, how good is a client at identifying their needs? Right? Can they express their needs? Do they know what they are? And can they assert them? So Clarissa yesterday did a really good job asserting her needs and said, oh, sorry, I can't listen to you. I really need a rest. So that takes, if you're trying to help a client do that, that would be a really good target. And also, we want to see, are they responsive to us in session? Can they do this bi-directional interaction? How many people have friends that basically have monologues? They talk at you, right? And they don't notice social cues. They don't notice that you're rolling your eyes or tuning out, getting really bored, or even getting frustrated. That is an internet sort of a relational target to focus on. And they do two-way relationships. And they might have difficulties describing their own emotions and feelings. And we talked a bit about that, Matt. We talked about tacting. Tacting are putting words to our inner experiences, putting words to our feelings and emotions. That's also a really important regulation skill. And the client in front, who's sitting in front of us, may not be able to do that. And a really important thing, in fact, is of course disclosure. Okay, so another bringing back yesterday, Matt was talking about the level of disclosure depending on the frequency. How often they disclose something, right? And what are the other ones you can remember?
What's the question, sorry?
Disclosure. So remember Matt mentioned yesterday of the type of disclosure that increases intimacy. So what are we looking at when we look at client disclosure? We want them to disclose.
So vulnerability. So I'm trying to remember the intimacy thing.
He was asleep. He was actually here. So one is frequency, right? How often do they disclose that information to people? And the less so if they give you an information and they haven't told many people about it and they tell you, that's a big deal. That will immediately increase intimacy between you and your client. They share something that they haven't told a lot of people. Right? And what else?
Is it the nature of the disclosure?
Nature.
Is it shallow or is it deeper?
Yeah.
As well, the level of discomfort.
The level of discomfort as well. Yeah, so that's kind of internal reaction. What's their level of discomfort in telling you that? And you kind of want to track that. So the more comfortable the disclosure, again, if they can tell you that, then you're building trust. That magnifies intimacy as well. So, disclosure and conflict avoidance. So you want to see how does the person in front of you deal with conflict. So sometimes you're going to disagree with your client eventually. You want to know, well, how can I fix that? Can they fix that? And can they fix that with you? If they can't fix that with you, then highly likely they can't fix conflicts with people outside. Or if they feel safe fixing it with you, because you've built up a really good relationship with them, you need to find out what's the difference. Why are you not feeling safe to deal with conflicts with other people outside? So these interpersonal categories help you just get a sense of what's going on in your room. Okay, are they able to do that? And I know we've got coaches here, and in the corporate world, this is also very relevant, because leadership is actually fundamentally about how do you relate to people. And leaders generally have very good people skills, and whoever they are working with, trust them. If you don't have trust, your leadership skills is going to be quite poor because you have no influence. Right? And one thing that we forget is, as therapists, our main tool is really influence. Without that, we can't change behavior. So, take out the therapy, I'm basically training you all to be leaders. It's actually the same process. If you can do therapy and you can influence people, you're basically all leaders in your own right. Yeah. So, which class of behavior does your client fit? So, can you give an example of maybe from your clients or people you know, and think about, okay, can you identify any problems? Or people who are really good at certain things, you think, oh my gosh, they're really good at that. That's really good. The CRB1, I really enjoy watching coming from them. Or CRB2, sorry. CRB1's problem. I'm getting it wrong.
I was like, what did I miss yesterday? See you guys.
I have clients that are really, really good. One specific client is really, really good at noticing. So really good at noticing how, she's feeling, I don't know, really sad at points, and that you can actually pinpoint where she's feeling that sadness.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, so she's really good at describing her feelings and tagging its experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's like CRB2, you want to sort of really reinforce. And what about CRB1? Is there anything that I'm not so good at? And sometimes...
certain behaviours she does that lose that ability, yes. Habitual things that she does, that she then loses the ability to get noticed.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So in certain situations, that goes out the window.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you have a client who finds it really hard to take compliments, which makes it really difficult to reinforce. So if ever I would try to reinforce something, I could see she was really uncomfortable, and she kind of tried to find something to describe it and use a lot of should. I should have done this, I should have done this differently. So that was definite CRB ones that we were working on.
Yeah.
So we tried to sit with compliments, did the 100 positives, and so read out things to me that she was.
So how does compliment fit into these 5 categories?
So I suppose it's receiving feedback, receiving positive feedback.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And potentially feeling close as well, because when people share something about you, that's them trying to make a connection.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, and it's also, it's like you offering a gift. You want to get close, but she's pushing away that gift all the time.
That's the exact metaphor that I used with her.
Yeah.
And I said, have you ever given someone a gift and they just give it back to you so that they don't like it?
Yeah.
How would you feel if that was you? Receiving a compliment, giving a compliment.
Absolutely.
And that landed quite well.
Because sometimes you can see that they kind of go through different categories, because there's something about also needs. When you give somebody a compliment, you're also giving them something that they kind of need as well at the same time. So it kind of crosses a lot of different things. Okay, so does that give you a sort of frame to hang on? It's like, okay, because we're looking at how the client's interacting with us and making a hypothesis about how they interact with people outside, it kind of gives you a frame to think, oh, is this working for them or is it not? Yeah.
Can I ask a question based on what Fran said about T1 and T2? So would that be a T1 and a T2? For what Fran just said about the compliments, and would it be considered a punishing thing, or would it be a T2 because it is evoking the behavior we want to see?
Okay, so it's basically an unsuccessful T2. So she's trying to reinforce a behavior, but it didn't land. So anything didn't land, then if I'm going to mark the therapy, I would say, well, actually, that's kind of an unsuccessful T2. It was a T2, but it didn't land, right? T1 would be she's actually evoking a problem behavior or reinforcing a problem behavior. Okay. T2 is an attempt to evoke a CRB2, but like I said, if it's not actually increasing the behavior, then it doesn't make sense. So it wasn't really successful evoke. And okay, so are you good at evoking, reinforcing client CRB2s? So that's a T2. T2 is noticing in session, am I good at evoking, actually deliberately bringing out their helpful behaviors. And when they are showing it in front of me, I'm able to give that natural reinforcer to increase the frequency of that behavior in session with me, and then also hopefully outside. Yeah.
So something in my world, something quite interesting. If I go back to your list, when I'm working with very senior leaders, while these are strengths that somebody is starting to deal with their own emotions and trying to be a little bit more personal disclosures, sometimes they can be too strong. And some of them, they can go into a room and they want to try and disclose all their personal things. The people are going, Jesus, you're the leader. I don't want you to be soft and nice. I want you to be the leader.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're overly strong and just calm it down a bit. And I think that's something quite in my world. I'd like to play with that.
Absolutely, and I'm really reflecting on that. And also it's how you share it. It's not, I'm falling apart, I'm getting divorced and it's a disaster, I'm about to go bankrupt. You don't want to tell your staff that. It's about, okay, yeah, I've been through this difficulty and this is what I've learned. That's leadership. It's modeling, this is what I learned. And maybe that piece is missing. When we share vulnerabilities, it just feels like we are sharing distress rather than, okay, this is done with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's right, so to clarify, does it make sense now T1 and T2? So T1 is when you basically evoke problem behavior and don't reinforce them as well, punish behavior, punish the RB2s. And T2 is when we are actually trying to bring out what we want to see.
So can I ask another question, going back a little bit? I'm still a bit confused about pacting.
Yeah, sure. Okay, which bit? Just everything?
Just generally, as a concept.
Okay. Now, if you can answer that question first, go for it.
Because I felt more confident after it was explained that I kind of looked up to your capabilities as a therapist. So if you're doubting, I'm starting to self-doubt now as well. So my understanding is, sorry to cut you off,
Can I explain that and then you can tell me if I...
Go for it.
Is it just being able to articulate what your experiences, your internal experiences?
Yes,
okay.
Yes,
I think the way you explained it was very...
It's actually really simple. It's learning to put words to our internal experiences so we can communicate that to another person. Right? So as a child grows up, we want to, well, a good enough caretaker would try to give the child the words to their experience. And if it's a good approximation, then it's much more helpful to the child. So they say, you know, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling bored. If they communicate that appropriately to another person, then they'll get their needs met a bit better.
And was this connecting to like the labeling of the inner voices type thing as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, because sometimes we learn words that are not helpful. And these words then build up personalities. And we end up with different parts of us. Does that make sense? So in a way we're going into, it's getting a little bit more complicated, but you guys come from ACT. There's a little bit of relational frame in all of this. There's language. So when language come into play, the kind of words we use or we learn to put onto our experiences can either help us or damage us. Okay, so tacting is kind of the FAP way of saying, okay, well, these are kind of the words. We can also play with these kind of words lightly. We want to help clients find better words to describe their experience, but we're not going to push away the words that doesn't work. We just want to integrate them. Right? So when we have different ways of describing ourselves, like you talk about the nagger, I can be really lonely all the time, stuck in this like, I'm lonely, I need people. And sometimes we have that narrative that run through our lives. That's just one narrative. We can make room for that.